So I finally got my hands on the new Razer DeathAdder V4 Pro, and if you're watching this, you're probably wondering, how does it actually compare to the V3, and is it really worth the upgrade? Let's start with the price. The V4 Pro comes in at a whopping $169.99, and yeah, no sugarcoating it, that's a premium price for a mouse. A big price tag like that puts it in the same league as Final Mouse, WL Mouse, and Logitech's gaming mice. And just for context, that's about $5 more than the cost of the V3 Pro hyperpulling dongle bundle sold in 2022. Now, even though it's technically more expensive, the V4 Pro might actually feel like you're getting more value out of the box, especially because it comes with this strange looking dongle thing. But more on that in a little bit. Comparing the V3 to the V4, the iconic ergo shape is 100% the same, and since it's the most popular shape in gaming, it wouldn't make too much sense for Razer to change this. But there are some modest updates. The first is the weight. Clocking in at 56 grams, Razer managed to shave off about 8 grams without compromising the structural integrity. I'm happy to say there's no flexing or creaking to be found. The 100% PTFE skate feels super smooth, no scratchiness or catches on soft pads. But what's interesting is the white variant is listed weighing 1 gram more, so I guess this means white finish must weigh more. If anybody's got a good explanation, please leave a comment down below. I'm genuinely curious on why that is. The most noticeable change is going to be the side buttons. My sources tell me this input was from pros in the competitive FPS scene. Razer shrank down the buttons and made them completely separate and distinct from one another. This is a change I 100% agree with, and while playing FPS games, yeah, it does help deliver a better experience than the V3 counterpart. Overall, I considered the side button update a noticeable improvement. They feel more tactile and responsive with a nice clicky sound. Other than how the side buttons feel, the V4 also brings a new surface texture, and this one may divide some users. The texture on the V4 is silky smooth, which is totally different than the V3, which to me, it feels like an eggshell. In the hands, I definitely prefer the older coating, but luckily, if smooth coatings aren't your thing, there are mouse grips included in the box. They're textured and definitely feel higher quality than some of the others I've used out on the market. I've never been the biggest fan of grips, but let me tell you, I've actually really enjoyed using these for gaming. It gave me a little more control than I usually get with the ergo shape, which is perfect for palming and decent for claw or fingertip grip styles, by the way. Texture and feel aside, something I found really neat was Razer's new Gen 4 switches. They're a bit different compared to the Gen 3s found in the V3 Pro. These are solderless optical mini form factor switches, meaning we can just press them straight out of the PCB without any issues. Razer boasts that the Gen 4 switches have a 100 million click lifespan and a 12% lighter actuation force. There's really no way for me to test the click lifespan, but I will say I can't really tell the difference between the switches in a real world scenario, so there you go. The real standout difference to me is the timbre the switches produce when pressed, and despite how cool I think the engineering behind these switches are, they sound pingy and hollow. I'm gonna quote my wife here. She said,
I don't like it.
Check it out for yourself. Which do you think sounds better, the V3 or V4? Let me know down in the comments. At first glance, the mouse wheel doesn't seem all that different. It keeps the familiar rubberized tread and overall aesthetic that users have come to expect. But Razer took this opportunity to upgrade to an optical scroll wheel, helping eliminate issues like ghost inputs and inconsistent scrolling. The scroll wheel click feels very tactile, while the actual scrolling is very ratchety. All you sensor nerds out there are gonna love this. All the optical data is fed into the new Focus Pro Gen 2 sensor, and it's an absolute beast with some truly impressive specs. And of course, as we all know, bigger number equal bigger better. Packing a massive 45,000 DPI, 900 IPS, and 85 grams of acceleration, this thing is absolutely overkill. But let's break down what all this means real quick. DPI, or dots per inch, measures how far the cursor moves on screen per inch of physical mouse movement. Higher DPI means the mouse sends more tracking data, so the cursor moves more on screen with less physical movement, making the mouse feel more sensitive. IPS, or inches per second, indicates how fast the mouse can move around while still tracking accurately. If you're whipping your mouse around for a flick shot, this makes sure that the sensor is accurately tracking the travel distance. Acceleration shows how the cursor speed changes relative to the speed of your physical mouse movement. Basically, the cursor speed adjusts based on how fast you move the mouse. In my experience, most users prefer a raw mouse input, however. Needless to say, this is probably the best sensor you can get your hands on right now. And even though I think no one will notice any real change from the V3's Gen 1 sensor to the Gen 2, I've found it very reliable and had a great time using it for gaming. But of course, these monster specs are going to need a power source. Inside, we'll find a 306 milliamp hour battery. Razer claims at 1000 Hz polling, you should be able to get around 150 hours of total use, and I'd say, yeah, that tracks. That's about what I was getting. I usually spend my time at 1000 Hz, and since there's no fancy LEDs on it, with the exception of the profile LED located between the mouse's paddles, there's nothing using additional power. However, at 8000 Hz polling, we can see that battery life fall to 22 hours. So I guess another reason not to use 8K for anything, really. Gone are the days of the small 2.4 GHz 1000 Hz polling USB receivers. Instead, out of box, we receive a sleek new rubberized hemisphere dongle capable of pulling up to 8000 Hz. I personally believe 8000 Hz is more marketing than something practical. For starters, it requires way more system resources to use, and second, like I mentioned before, it brings your battery life all the way from 150 hours to 22 hours. But 8K criticisms aside, this thing caught me by total surprise. The most shocking thing to me is how much this thing weighs. It's like a chunky little fishing weight weighing 45 grams, which is by design, I assume, so it stays in place on your desk. I have to say, I really do like the hemisphere design. It's got a really cool aesthetic. It has a smooth, rubbery feel with 3 rows of RGB LEDs on the front that give us some basic information. From left to right, by default, it will show connection status, battery life, and polling rate. However, if you don't want the status LEDs enabled or you want to change up the order, it can be customized through Razer Synapse. Razer Synapse does have some cool features, but it's worth mentioning that you don't need it installed for anything to work. Out of box, you can cycle through the most commonly used DPIs and run it as a set it and forget it configuration. But in case you hit your head and install Razer Synapse, let me tell you about some of the other features. We can make any of the obvious polling rate or DPI adjustments, but something new that caught my eye was being able to run 2 separate polling rates. This works based on if Synapse detects if a full screen game is running or not, and will automatically change your polling rate to a predetermined user setting. Something that I found unique is dynamic sensitivity. This is going to allow you to set 2 different DPIs on a motion acceleration curve. For example, you could set a jump from 1600 to 3200 DPI and have it only activate during a quick swipe. It's worth mentioning that you can fully customize this or use any of the presets. I found myself using the jump preset, and I'm pretty conflicted as somebody who uses raw mouse input about how I feel about it. There's Razer mouse rotation, which lets you adjust the sensor to match your natural hand angle, so horizontal mouse movements correspond more accurately on screen. So if you're that guy I grew up with who holds your mouse like this, then you should be covered. Don't hold your mouse like that. It's bad. The DeathAdder V4 only includes one onboard memory profile. And I find that incredibly disappointing, especially for the price. I would expect a few different onboard memory options, but we can still customize all our settings and then uninstall Razer Synapse, and the DeathAdder will still work with your safe preferences, even without the software running on your PC. So at least we get that. Overall, the DeathAdder V4 Pro sticks with the iconic, tried and tested shape, but adds a few notable upgrades like lighter weight, fully optical switches and scroll wheel, and the improved Focus Pro Gen 2 sensor. You're also getting a 2-year warranty, which I think is fair given the price point. That being said, if you already own a V3, these updates might not feel like a major leap, and I personally don't think it's a must-have upgrade. At $170, it's a premium buy, and with so many strong options hitting the market, it's a tough sell unless you're specifically after the DeathAdder shape and want the latest and greatest. If you're brand new to the DeathAdder line and shopping in the high-end category though, the V4 Pro might be worth checking out. If this video helped you out or you just enjoyed hanging out, consider liking and subscribing. It really does help the channel out. And drop a comment if you're thinking about picking up the V4 or sticking with the V3. I'd love to hear your take on it. As always, thank you for watching. I hope you learned something. And until next time, GG.